Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Freelance episode 27. We've had a few months off due to various personal stuff, but we're back and we've got a very angry looking Matt Easton joining us. Um,
With a fire.
so, Matt, what's going on?
Oh, it's just my fidget toy. I love it.
Okay.
It's just my ADHD.
Well, I'm glad that none of my students have that
Is that a
particular
cult?
fidget toy.
It's an Adams. It's English.
Okay. Does that mean that it doesn't work very well?
This one doesn't work at all because it's deactivated.
Oh,
so just if if MI5 are watching in,
yeah,
it's deactivated.
Good. Well, we've got a few people joined us already, so if you're there, say hello. We've got Robert, we've got YJ, we've got Yeshua and Yarden. So good to see you guys. If you can hear us, do say hello. It's been a while since we've done this, so our audio settings.
Yeah.
But we've just been catching up a little bit. But obviously, for the sake of the people, Nick, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very good. I am quite tired. It has been a very, very busy June for me. July looking, let's say less than half as busy as June, but still not like relaxed by any stretch. But yeah, I'm generally doing pretty good.
No, good. Matt, what about you? I know we're going to talk about it in more detail later, but you've had a pretty busy time as well.
I've had such a crazy month that I feel a bit like Mel Gibson in Lethal Weapon at this point. I feel like I'm a complete wild card and I could go off and smash something down, or I'm getting
fills
into
me with joy for the cheeks.
I'll be fine by then. I'll probably be quite relaxed by then. But yeah, I'm getting into lots of arguments online, and I just feel like just completely shit posting basically. So,
are you arguing with people on the internet, Matt?
I mean, I've always been prone to that, but just about anything, particularly about aeroplanes or things like that at the moment. Yeah, so when people say something wrong about the F-35A, then I'm just like furiously typing.
Is this related to your post judging the way that the US have named their planes?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the Americans realise what a growler is to at least some English people. But yeah, naming your F-18 a growler is just well. Anyway, we'll explain that another time, maybe.
Yeah. I think they need a few things explained to them over in the US.
Well, we've got F-22s here at the moment, just to make it topical. I see that F-22s are landing in Lakenheath, so expect to see some interesting news in the next 48 hours.
That seems far too modern for me.
I was going to say
there's no swords involved. It's
no horses.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it looks like we got a good group with us already. We're not gonna go on for ages today. Sorry, I'm fiddling with a half finished project and probably making horrible noises for everyone.
Rami's already asked a question, which I've got a direct answer to.
Cool. I'll just finish. We're not going to go very late because we're all incredibly hot, and I don't know. Matt, do you have air conditioning in your office?
I don't, but as we were talking just before we started, I was in Serbia last week and it was 38 degrees. So to be honest, it's actually seemed quite pleasant to me.
Okay, so Matt's doing the best of all of us, but yeah, we won't be hanging out for ages this evening just to manage people's expectations. So Matt, Rami says, a question for Zach and Matt. I've read that longswords were sometimes held like a couch lance to pierce armor. How truthful is that?
So the answer is yes, it was 100% done. Categorically, it's even detailed in treatises. Interestingly, it's detailed in treatises on foot. So although it's being couched like a lance, they're not doing it on horseback. Not to say they didn't do it on horseback, but they're actually doing it on foot. But the context in which it's being done is that they're half swording. and I think this is in Gladiatoria, if I remember correctly. It's one of the German treatises, and it basically says you try and get your sword point stuck into someone's voider, and if it sticks in the mail, you immediately tuck it under your armpit and shove. So it's a similar thing to what you do with a rondel dagger. It's not stabbing like this. It's more trying to find a gap, and then once you found a gap, push the thing in.
Yeah.
So there we go.
But you can sometimes get the idea of if someone's couching a sword, it's like they're doing it like a lance and then charging at each other. It's not that.
I mean, they're just using their body weight, really.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, sure. Michael Foley says that it's 109 freedom units in Tucson yesterday.
Tucson. do you know what's funny about that? It's literally about a week ago, because there's a car called a Tucson. I can't remember what make it is. And my daughter read the back of it. She said, that car's called a Tucson. And I went, Tucson.
So I'm on the same reading comprehension level as a 12-year-old.
12-year-old. But I've been in Tucson, and it's a really cool place. I'd love to go back to Tucson one day. And it was really it felt really kind of like a bit arty, a bit bohemian, and quite chilled. It was very nice. I say chilled, but of course it's in the desert, so it was very hot.
Yeah.
Company I work for was founded in Tucson.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I was going to say about Rami's question, like, I appreciate that, like, the lore about me that I go all polearms all the time and no swords meant that that question was not directed anywhere near me. I feel like I've managed to establish myself now with like a brand.
Yeah. Yeah,
you're the stick guy.
Yeah.
You have recently bought a Hobbit sword, though, haven't you, Nick? So...
Oh, I bought the Custilia, the short, like 2-foot sword that Todd's just started doing in Sharp, and it's just lovely. It really fits the category that I often like my swords to fall into, which is it's the backup weapon when things are very close and nasty, but it has that extra like length and utility over a knife. And it makes me happy now that I have, sharp rondel, sharp like sidearm sword, sharp spear all the way through, which means that I can now do like a complete impression without any reenactment blunts, which is lovely.
Nice. Very cool. Both the Royal Armouries collection that Matt has been working on and Todd's expanding range are just great for reenactors, I think.
So I've got some top secret news on that. I'm working on another line as well. So, but anyway, more about that in the future. But yes, no, it's the availability of good historically accurate sharps has come on leaps and bounds in the last, well, certainly the last decade, but I would say in the last 5 years.
I mean, 10 years ago, if you wanted a sharp, you'd be looking at $1,000.
Yeah, and you can still obviously spend $1,000 quite easily.
Quite easily.
One of the great things that Todd brought is his knowledge of scabbards and belts and buckles, because I mean, I work with a few different sword makers, and there's quite a few companies that can make pretty good swords these days, historically accurate swords. But those aren't usually the same companies that can also make historically accurate or decent looking, even just nice looking scabbards. So, you can spend $1,000 or $800, $1,200 on an Albion, but Albion don't make scabbards. So you've then got to go and spend another $1,000 on a scabbard from Todd or whoever. It's great that Todd gives you the whole package from 2 points of view. One, because swords are supposed to be a package with the sword and belt, with the scabbard and belt. But additionally, from a safety point of view, and I think if you've got sharp swords around, it's nice to have somewhere, a safe way of keeping them.
Yeah.
Unrelated to sharps, I did notice a question in the chat from Mike about an unfortunate incident that happened at Bodiam last weekend. I do know some things, and I'm not going to be talking about it. And I think it's important not to speculate about that while there's an ongoing investigation into the incident, and also out of respect for the people involved.
I would just say one thing, and it's not really, it's sort of tangential, but a few places have been talking about it as a HEMA injury, and I've been pointing out to people it wasn't a HEMA event.
No.
It was a reenactment. It was a putting a show on for the public context. It wasn't competitive HEMA. And so some of the American HEMA people have been like, oh, why weren't they wearing what they call perf plates, or perforated plates inside the visor slit? And I'm like, because they weren't doing HEMA. that wasn't the context of it, you know. And I show them pictures of us at Tewkesbury with open face helmets. I'm like, it's a completely different context.
Yeah. But my heart goes out to all the people involved in that. It's just awful. But yeah.
Yeah, I think everyone wants to find out more about it, but I think it's important to wait for the people involved to release that information, because it's very easy, as Terry Pratchett once wrote, a, a lie can get around the world before the truth has got its boots on.
Wow, that's a really good quote. I've never heard that, but that is
that's from a book called The Truth, which I recently read because it's incredibly pertinent to a lot of modern society, as Pratchett's works often are.
Absolutely. Yeah. So so we won't be talking about that today. We are going to do a little game later on, but before we get to that, we normally do a project section and then a research section, but we've come to the point where actually we realize they're often one and the same thing, because whatever you're researching, you're also making, or vice versa. So, Matt, have you been working on any projects or doing any research recently?
Yes, quite a lot. So one of the videos I put up during the week, on Monday I think it was, talking about potential relationships between the design of Messer, as we commonly call it, more correctly a Langmesser, the hilts on them, the hilt specifically, not the blades, and I think some people missed that point, and non-European swords, but more specifically Ottoman and Mamluk. Now, obviously, we talk about Europe and not Europe, which obviously in a medieval context is kind of a meaningless. You know, if you're talking about what's now Greece, for example, we consider Greece as Europe, but obviously Greece was conquered by the Ottomans, so, you know, as were a lot of the Balkans. So there was clearly, we know there was a huge amount of cultural exchange, and I learned a new word. The new word is Turkery. And apparently Turkery is the European, or should we say kind of Christendom part of Europe, imitation of Turkish fashion, you know, all sorts of other things. And we know that this was a thing because in the 15th century, certain people, certain clothes, particularly hats, started to be influenced by Turkish designs, because obviously the Turks were making great ground at expanding into what's now considered Europe, the Balkans and the Byzantine Empire. And there was lots of fighting, Battle of Nicopolis, 1396, I think it was. And lots of people started looking at Ottoman things. And I personally think that there are specific details of European weapon designs in the 15th century that take some inspiration from Turkish. Very subtle, very small. It's not a big thing. I'm not saying that the Langmesser was a Turkish invention. It wasn't. However, there's some design details of the hilts which I think have a relationship with Ottoman weapons. But it also goes back the other way, and there are weapons that we find in North Africa that definitely, categorically, had European, specifically Spanish and Italian influence as well. So it went both ways.
I mean,
okay, so is that linked to your work on a new range of swords, or is it, or are you not allowed to tell us that?
It might do.
Okay.
I can't tell you a lot because it may or may not.
Okay.
So I'm working on some swords, and one of them might relate to that. Yeah, but that's not definite yet. So.
Cool. All right.
I was just going to say on that kind of video and that research that you're doing, that like I would never have put that together, but as soon as you started saying it, I was kind of sat here thinking like, well, yeah, that makes perfect sense, and that's like true across like the early medieval period and antiquity as well, that you get these design patterns from one part of what we would call Europe showing up in other parts, or getting absorbed and reinvented or reimagined as time goes on. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And you're talking about kind of Eastern fashions in a Western context, like again, unsurprising given the kind of fashion integration that goes on in sort of the Crusader states in the early medieval period, or well, high medieval period, I guess.
What I find really weird is there's quite a lot of pushback to this idea. I think people think of certain designs or objects as belonging to a certain culture, but there are, I say, so to make an explicit example, if we talk about cultural exchange in weapon design in the 16th century or the 17th century, people don't balk at that at all, because everybody knows. I mean, if you look at Polish swords, everybody knows Polish swords owed an awful lot, as did Hungarian, to Ottoman Turkish influence and other, you know, and going all the way back to Charlemagne's time, we know that, you know, certain sword designs from the East were sort of came into the Carolingian Empire. So there are certain known things, and people just kind of, because they know that, they accept that. But then when you propose something new, you're like, well, maybe, you know, and to flip it on its head and turn it around the other way, and I'm probably going to make a video about this at some point, I don't think a huge number of people know that those big old guns that the gates of Constantinople were blown apart with were made by a Hungarian gunner. And in fact, he'd offered his services to various European powers who told him to sod off. And then he went and offered his services to the Ottomans, and they went, that sounds interesting. So, you know.
And to go back earlier, like, you know, the Roman gladius starts life as a Spanish weapon. And, you know, it's a smaller scale, but it's the same thing. You have like a particular state that's very distinct culturally that picks something up and runs with it.
And the Romans were famous. I mean, their helmet is the Gallic style helmet. The mail is probably Celtic introduction, and it goes on, you know.
Yeah, their democracy loosely based on Greek.
Yeah, it's so, you know, cultural exchange, it's just everywhere all the time, and it goes in every direction and both directions, and it's often very complex. And I think sometimes, you know, people simplistically, so I made that video on Monday, maybe I wasn't clear enough, but some people kind of go, oh, well, I don't agree that the, you know, the Langmesser comes from Turkey. Well, that wasn't what I was saying. What I was saying was, there's this thing that's a Langmesser, and there were different types of Langmesser, and some of them have certain design features, but I think, much like some of their hats or much like some of their jewelry, maybe had external influence from this place or this place. You know. Who knows? It's an ongoing research thing, anyway.
Great, thank you. So, Nick, have you been doing any research or projects recently?
Projects, yes. Research, less. Well, again, depends on what you define as research, because we'll get on to it later, but there are some changes at Empire for me, which has involved doing a bunch more reading of the Empire wiki in order to figure out what's going on. So that kind of counts as research, I guess. Projects wise, I've got a lot of small projects. Matt's done an excellent job of filling out a bodyguard for Tewkesbury, which means I need to count how many Gloucester Bens I have and probably make some more. So that's going to happen this weekend.
Incidentally, it's one less now because we've had one drop out, unfortunately, because of family stuff. So.
Oh, well. I still think I will have to make a couple. And honestly, I've got a piece of cloth that was set aside for Bens, and I'll probably just make up as many as that piece of cloth makes, and then I'll have them all done. And then there's always just the ongoing thing, like once the reenactment season gets into full swing, reenactment, LARP season, whatever, stuff needs repairing. There's always things to repair. Hose in holes in hose. you know, weapons need cleaning, armor maintenance. I've got to go through and check all my arming points to make sure none of them are on the verge of snapping before going on the field at Tewkesbury, this kind of thing. So yeah, a little bit of research, mostly maintenance. There's a couple of questions for you as well, Zach.
Maintenance can take a lot. So just before my first event of the season, I got my salad out of its bag and it had orange rust in 3 places. That was the night before we left for it. So yeah, that was upsetting. And another thing that's upsetting, and Matt, you might have seen part of this. Apparently, Spangenhelms aren't a thing in Norman Britain, and
so I saw that. That was yeah.
so to give some context, in October last year, I decided I would start a new project, which would be to create a 11th century kit for either Norman or Saxon, so that I can hopefully take part in the Battle of Hastings. And I picked that because I thought that would be reasonably simple, because it's not like late period plate armor or anything like that. Every new bit of research has shown me that this is more complicated than I thought it was. And so I asked for if anyone had any measurements for the thickness of a Spangenhelm, thinking this is something that I might be able to make myself. I've got some limited experience armoring. We've all got friends that do armoring that could join me in it. And yeah, I asked, Matt answered, and then you also called in a professional 11th century historian, and apparently they're not Spangenhelms. So yeah, what do you think, Matt?
So I'm just gonna look up. It's David.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna see if I can pronounce his surname. So I think it's David Scribnerny, but
Okay, yeah.
I think he's Czech. So I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce his surname. But I knew that. So he's as far as I'm aware, one of the leading researchers on arms and armor, but particularly I think armor of this period, the sort of Viking through to early Norman period. Now his answer surprised me. So his answer was, "What's Spangenhelm?" Well, so I think anybody who's seen the Bear Tapestry would go, "Those Spangenhelms on the Bear Tapestry."
Yeah, so that was my answer.
They look like Spangenhelms.
Yeah.
So look, I'm a former archaeologist, and I understand how archaeologists work. Archaeologists tend to prefer things to come out of the ground or out of a river, and if it hasn't come out of the ground or out of a river, then they find it difficult to discuss its existence. I'm actually, so my background, actually, I did a history degree with archaeology tagged on. So I come at it more from an art history point of view. And I go, well,
yeah,
we know there were one-piece helmets. We know that there were Spangenhelms for a long time at the same, in existence together. Even if the one-piece helmets were starting to take over in 1066, I don't for a second think that all the Spangenhelms would have disappeared. We know that hauberks and helmets stayed in use certainly for generations, possibly for 100, 200 years in some cases. So just because a helmet, like the Coppergate helmet is a perfect example, actually. The Coppergate helmet was almost certainly hidden during, maybe let's say 865-ish, so during the big Danish invasion of that period, Norse invasion. But it dates to the 700s, so that was probably 100 years old when it was stuck underneath someone's floorboards. Why did it still exist? Maybe it was an heirloom, maybe it was representative of a noble line, or that's my personal theory. There's all sorts of possible reasons, and I'm sure you could write a good book around this. But fundamentally, so his assertion is that we don't have any evidence actually for Spangenhelms in that period. I don't fully know what he's basing it on, whether that's based on excavated examples, whether it's also based on art. It probably is based on both. However, personally, I would say that there is evidence in art of Spangenhelm from the 11th century. And overall, I would say also we lack data. So it's very difficult to say categoric things about the year 1066 when, you know, there's lots of fundamental, very basic things we just don't know because we don't have enough data. I mean, you know, let's look at the Hawbooks in, I've made videos about this, the Hawbooks in the Bayeux Tapestry, which seem to show leggings on them, but there's no actual real other evidence for that.
Yeah.
It's just the Bayeux Tapestry. And is it an artistic, you know, blooper? We don't know.
Yeah.
We just don't know.
Yeah. So so that's what I've been researching. That's what I've been kind of getting ready to make once the summer holidays come around, because I am still a teacher and I do still work to the classic 6-week summer holiday that we all used to know and love. Yeah, what I'm thinking I'm probably going to do. So I've got a friend, Nick knows him as well. I don't know if you do, Matt, called Mitch.
Yeah.
And,
he's got some mail of mine at the moment, actually. I need to go to his place and pick it up.
Okay, cool.
So if Mitch is watching, hi.
He's got a really nice Anglo-Saxon kit, which is based on the Bayeux Tapestry. And what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to try and build a kit that also matches the Bayeux Tapestry, but takes wherever he's made a choice, I will make the opposite choice, and then we can do a video about it and talk about, you know, why it was open to interpretation and the different reasons why we've gone for that. So I think that would be a cool idea. So that's what
Mitch has got one of those mail flaps that comes up around here, which is a really interesting bit, because obviously in Bayeux Tapestry we see this, and not on all of them, but on some of them you see this square. And there's, ever since I was like a child reading books about that, people have been debating, what is this square on their chest? Is it reinforcement? Is it a flap? Is it how they get in and out? Who knows? And one interpretation is that it's a hanging down section that comes up and ties around here, which is inspired by later mail, like sort of towards 1200 and post 1200, where we do know that that was a thing. Is it that? Is it not that? We just don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say, but that's I think that's a good way of going about it. Is you know, we try and go for as solid as we can with the evidence, but it doesn't always work out. You can't always say for sure. So
one thing that I've noticed a lot of Hastings reenactors, I would say, get wrong is that they have mail shirts that just have a neck hole up here. And certainly if you look at Bayeux Tapestry, most of them, the mail goes over the head. Because when you see the helmets falling off, they've got mail over their head. So there seems to be some sort of hood attached to it, which is what Mitch has got, I think.
Yeah, an integrated hood.
Yeah.
Okay, should we do a few questions from the chat before we get on to events? So Rami says, another question if you don't mind, can Knight Heavy Lance really reach 20 kilograms in weight? So I don't think so. I've never heard that number being quoted for that.
20 kilograms, that's like 40 pounds, more than 50 pounds, isn't it?
It's like an entire box of carrots.
Yeah.
I love that carrots is the...
It's a lot. So this is a pretty heavy lance from the Royal Armouries. And it's considered to be a tournament lance from the early 16th century. And that comes to 4.7 kilograms.
Yeah, so, which sounds absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and things like this would probably not be. This would be too heavy to be used in war. Or rather, you wouldn't need to use them in war necessarily.
Yeah.
And
I don't think
often,
£10 is that much actually. I've held halberds that were about £8, and they're
okay.
fine.
Well, we know that they did have
Mm.
different weight lances for use in tournament than in war. Actually, this one, I think the ribs down it, if you have a look, will actually reduce the overall weight of this compared to a similar size lance
Mm. It's
of
like a
the
filler in a sword blade. Yeah.
yeah. But the heaviest lances were often, um, in order to be able to use them by the 16th century, you get these extra heavy arretes, which not only link into the lance at the front here to stop the lance going out the back, but they also have a hook on a metal arm coming out the back of the cuirass, which is there to stop the lance tip from going too low. Because obviously, like a lever, if the front goes down, obviously the back is coming up. So you've got that hook there. And in fact, they have one of these in the very first jousting scene of A Knight's Tale.
Hmm.
You remember when they go, "Get it in the cradle, get it in the cradle." Um, but it's quite a late invention as far as we're aware, and basically comes about as they're trying to make jousts more and more impressive and more exciting. They start making the lances bigger, and so they start adding these extra pieces to keep it as safe as charging at an enemy holding a tree trunk actually can possibly be. Um,
I,
these armors were using sharpened tips as well. I believe there's actually scratches in this armor. This one's from the Wallace collection. If you want to go and see it, there's scratches in this armor which have come from the tip of an opposing lance.
I was quite surprised. I was at the Armored Fighter event. We borrowed some solid lances off Dom Sior, and I think they were made of pine, because they're basically saplings. I think they're just saplings they chop down and then shape. And I was quite surprised by how easily they broke. We broke about 3 just in training. So
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely a I can't remember the name of it, but there are different types of lances which whoever's writing a jousting manual doesn't actually really give too much information about it because everyone knows, right? So they just frustratingly mention these extra heavy lances without giving
mm.
any measurements or anything like that. So there were some that were easier to break than others, and I think it's basically down to the thickness of the tree that you cut down.
And the
uh,
type of wood.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean
Almus
pine is quite fragile.
Alma says Lindy Beige put up a video about horses being one-shot weapons for medieval cavalry because the shock of performing a charge traumatized them and undermined their training. Can Zach confirm that? I am not going to confirm this. That was I watched that video and I considered making a video about it, but I didn't. I didn't get around to it. That was an interview with another reenactor that I didn't know, that I didn't get a chance, that I wasn't able to chat to. So I wasn't able to get his full opinion on it. Basically, the idea is so much training goes into getting a horse ready for battle, and it's all behavioral training, basically. So once you once you've gone into battle and they've charged through, if they do survive, then it's been such a horrific thing that that horse is not going to be, you're not going to be able to behaviorally train them to do that again. Now, I don't think that's true, because we know from later periods where they actually record things a bit better that it's not true. um, and I think it basically comes from a reenactment mentality of kindness to your horse, and your horse is your pet or even your family member, as some people consider them, um, rather than a tool for a job. And also, the horses that we are most likely to buy or are even going to be trainable for a reenactment event are what we would call warm blooded, which is generally cold blooded, sorry, which is generally calm, and basically it was bred into them to make them good at pulling carriages without running off, or uh, ploughing fields without going zigzag all over it. And that's not
Yeah,
the horses that they were choosing for war horses.
they're
Uh,
different. They're different animals.
yeah, and some of them could be very aggressive. We're not talking about like vampire horses, like breaking down doors and sucking your blood, but you know, um, even the difference between a stallion and a gelding is huge.
So I think. Sorry,
Well,
sorry, Nick, you go.
I was just going to say, when you're talking about like horses with aggression, like you see that with the kind of horses that are bred for things like horse guards, right? These are not nice horses from your local riding school.
Yeah,
They will bite you if you stand too close to them,
yeah,
because that's their job. And you're going like taking that to another level.
Yeah, and there are so many different types of horses for different types of jobs, and most people's modern familiarity with horses is riding school ponies, basically. It's, Welsh cobs and stuff, and they're not bred for the same purposes, and they're not treated in the same way, and there's a degree of natural selection. If a horse is particularly calm and nice and whatever, off it goes to work on the farm, or to use essentially a taxi cab of its day. It's not the war horse,
yeah,
and so I think you're dealing with different animals. You're also dealing with different humans who treated animals in a completely different way. And you only, you only need to look at medieval art to see some of the brutality that was done to horses back in the day. But exactly as you said, Zach, the fact is that we've got numerous historical accounts of of horses being used repeatedly in a campaign. So we know that it happened, and like you say, also relatively modern history. Whether we come through to World War One, I mean, we know that cavalry was used extensively in World War One, not just by the British, but especially on the Eastern Front and down in Lawrence's Arab army in the Middle East, and so. So throughout history, war horses have been used throughout campaigns, but there's a last final element specific to the medieval period. So I'm listening to Michael Livingston's book, audiobook, about the Agincourt campaign. And Henry V, when he went on that campaign, took 60 horses. So there's been a lot written about the fact, he rode a white horse, because it was the French said, he rode this magnificent white horse. Well, the records show that he had 60 horses, and most of them were white. So it could have been any one of those. So, if one horse decides, I don't like what we did yesterday, I'm not going to be very compliant today, well, you've got a whole bunch of other ones. They were seen as a disposable, within certain bounds, seen as you just had a whole bunch of them.
Yeah. And the, we can say that the spurs that they wore, they weren't using them to the extent of them all the time. But if you needed to, you put those spurs on, and that horse goes where you want it to go, because it's life or death for both of you. And
one of my favourite sources to demonstrate that is the Romance of Alexander, which is a mid 14th century source, good for Battle of Cressy kind of armour research. And if you look at all the horses, they've all got little red spots down on their sides, level with the spurs are.
Yeah. Okay. So, Matt, here's a question from Robert Ilston. He says, I asked this question on your Patreon channel, but since you're here, did the development of the coat of plates happen just after or before they started to put plates on the shins, knees, or elbows?
So I did notice
In one
that actually.
sentence.
Oh God. So overall, the coated plates came first.
Yeah.
So the coated plate seems to have become common from about 1250 onwards, whereas plate defences on the limbs don't seem to have really become common until after 1300. That's the
Yeah.
short answer. It
Okay.
is slightly more. So if you look at the Morgan Bible, you can see that Goliath wears shin bolts or greaves. However, as many people have pointed out on my channel, that's partially because the Bible says that Goliath wore armor on his legs. So the person in 1250-ish making the Morgan Bible put greaves on Goliath's
Yeah.
legs. Nobody else in the Morgan Bible has greaves on their legs. So
Yeah.
they existed, but they weren't common.
He's specifically described as wearing scale as well, isn't he? So often
Oh, really? I
he's
didn't know
wearing
that.
scale armor, even if that's not actually applicable for that time period.
Interesting.
Yeah. Robert also asks, what would be the significant differences between 1066 Saxon and 1066 Norman kit? It appears to be moustaches and undercuts. So the
And yeah,
Saxons have beautiful moustaches. The Normans have a very severe undercut where their hair's basically shaved from that point downwards. Um, and apart from that, the only real other difference is that the Saxons, some of them, are depicted with round shields, whereas the Normans are all uniformly depicted with teardrop shields.
and what sometimes gets overlooked is there's a couple of oval shields in there as well.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's very interesting actually because we know that Kite, well, we suspect anyway that Kite shields had already made their way into England because, of course, Edward the Confessor already had a huge amount of Norman influence. So, and people often also forget that Harold Godwinson, I believe his mother was Danish. And of course, the households are a Danish establishment as well because you've got King Canute and Harder Canute and all of those. So the English,
Normans are historically
yeah, exactly. So
Scandinavian.
the English by this point have already had a huge amount of Viking, or a mixture of Danish and Norse, Norwegian mostly, and Norman input, and Frankish probably to some extent as well. So there's probably all sorts of things going on. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that circular shields had probably been completely abandoned by the Normans at that point, whereas they were still hanging around in England.
yeah. I think as well, you've got to bear in mind that's not necessarily a cultural thing, and it's possibly to do with the fact that the Normans are a professional army that have been raised for this particular invasion and equipped out of William's pocket, whereas the Saxons include many herdsmen
Yeah.
who it may be that they're being depicted with out of date armor, such as a round shield and an oval shield, in order to depict the fact that they are of a lower status, or they're not as well equipped.
I mean, there's almost certainly that. Again, we're coming into cultural cross pollination of ideas here as well.
Yeah.
The kite shield itself probably comes from the Byzantine Empire, so the Normans probably got it from southern European contact with Byzantines and people down in Sicily and people like that, probably around the year 1000 AD. So they'd probably had it for a few decades by that point, whereas it would have been a relatively brand new thing in England.
Yeah.
I could be remembering this wrong, but isn't one of the problems in like southern Italy that there are tons of Normans running around down there towards the end of the 11th century?
Yeah, they ruled Sicily. Yeah, so Sicily went from basically being an Islamic controlled, North African controlled place to being a Norman controlled place. So it wasn't really very Italian at all at that point.
No, but then you have all of these Normans running around southern Italy causing problems, and that's part of the catalyst for the Pope preaching a crusade to get them all out of Italy.
Okay, we've got another question from OBX Dewey. would the Norman mail armor in the tapestry be a two-piece or a jumpsuit tied at the back? Or if two pieces, would the pants be knickers or possibly a cover for the front and tied at the back? The big answer is we don't know. The second answer is I'm hopefully going to do a video on that. Maybe I'll get Matt involved as well, because I know Matt has some opinions that might have changed a bit since his last video on this particular
Yeah,
one.
maybe.
So we will answer that, but we'll leave it for another time. And Michael Foley, I know, is really waiting for that video. He keeps asking me for it, so I'm really sorry I haven't got around to that. Yes. Okay. I think that we are. I think we're at the end of the questions there. So we were just going to catch up on some events that we've done recently. So the first event that happened, I think, like chronologically, was Nick at Empire. Is that right? No?
Barnet, Empire, Skirmish, Windsor.
There's been a Windsor one as well. I didn't even know about the Windsor one. Okay, so
Yeah,
I'll
I
talk
was at
about
Windsor last
Barnet
weekend.
because that was the only one that I was at. So Barnet seemed to go really well, due to the fact that I was bringing my son for his first proper reenactment battle. He's been to a joust or two before, but his first proper reenactment battle. We only day tripped for the Sunday. He absolutely loved it. They had some kiddie battles there, which he got involved in his medieval outfit. It was really great, and the fact that they have moved site now to an ice cream farm makes it even more appealing to.
Sorry, an ice cream farm, did you say?
Yeah. You can see the ice creams roaming in the distance. In one of the.
I thought they grew on trees.
Yeah. No, they do. They call it an ice cream farm.
Wow.
Yeah, there we are. It seemed to go really well. The fighting was good. It was safe for them, as far as I could tell. There were, there's always a couple of minor injuries in this sort of thing, but it was good natured and safe, and there wasn't much craziness going on. I was hoping there'd be a leather stall there, but there wasn't, so I wasn't able to stock up on leather. But there was a growing market, shall we say? So, yeah, I thought it was a great weekend. Calvin, my son, said that he wanted to stay and do it again on the Monday, which unfortunately wasn't an option because it was only Saturday, Sunday. So, yeah. The Saturday it did rain, but apparently everyone had fun anyway. So
It
yeah,
rained a lot
yeah,
on Saturday. I thought Barnet was great. Echoing that, my understanding is that it's going to run again next year at the same venue. Everyone was
great.
happy from that perspective. I think it's got a lot of room to grow. The site is significantly larger than the previous site, and that's great. I think it's primed to be one of the best reenactment events in the South if it keeps going the way it's going. Personally, it was a challenging event because it was coming off the back of a very busy 10 days, so I was very tired, but the event was so good that that didn't really seem to matter.
I really, really want to do Barnet. I've never even been as a spectator, for a few reasons, partly because it's nice and close, but also because I really want to do another Wars of the Roses event, and the person who I'm sort of trying to portray, I suppose, in terms of my kit and stuff, was at Barnet and Tewkesbury. So
yeah.
Well, and if it keeps going the way it's going, I'll be doing Gloucester there for at least a couple of years. So.
Right. So we'll hopefully get Matt along next year. So the next event after that was Nick. You're the only one that went to Empire E2, and something big.
Yeah, I was the only
there,
one here too. Yeah. We didn't sell out of all of our cheese. No. I want to start off and say E2 was a great role play event. I had a lot of fun. It was really cool. It really, really sucked that my character died on the Saturday.
Yeah.
And it's fine. It's roleplay. Like, these things happen, and it was a combat encounter, which means that there is a risk involved. Like, looking back on it, like, it's a really interesting study on like how things can go wrong incredibly quickly in a combat environment, because we were flanked. Like, there are reasons for that I don't need to go into, but we were flanked. A portion of the army, the skirmish force on the player side, broke and ran, which turned it into a rout. A group of us got surrounded and killed, and the rest of the players surrendered, because otherwise they were going to die too. And it was all over and done with in the space of a few minutes, really. Which is a super interesting study. That is the kind of thing that you'd never get in reenactment, is how that all went down. It sucked. I had put a lot of like time and energy and money into like different aspects of the portrayal of that particular character, but that's roleplay. I have new character ideas, which is why I've been doing a bunch of research on the wiki, and I wasn't the only one in that situation. So
can I ask, as someone who doesn't know,
was,
did you
yeah.
Why did you die? Did you die because you were did you do something heroic or foolish? Were you abandoned by the others?
There are a number of things, and like, I don't want to. There's like a gray area between like in character and out of character things here. So like, factually, the reason I died was because I got hit 11 times and then nobody healed me before 3 minutes ran out and I bled out. Like, that is like the mechanical system involved there. I had 11 hit points. I was hit 11 times. I fell over, and then I had 3 minutes to be rescued, and nobody was able to rescue me. As I say, the situation there was that we were flanked. A group of players decided that their best chance of survival was just to leave, so they ran away, which then put the rest of us in a much worse situation, and it kind of all went sideways from there. The kind of There are different like in character interpretations of what went down, and there are consequences for people because of what happened, and that's a really interesting thing that we'll get to explore like in play. But yeah, broadly the mechanics are, as you have a set number of, in this particular game anyway, you have a set number of hit points. There was potentially a small window for my character to have extracted himself and not died, but that would have meant leaving his friends lying on the floor bleeding out, and that's not a thing that my character in that situation would do. And like, on reflection, the moment that my character actually died was the point when he chose to stand over the body of his friends.
Yeah.
Because like, if I'd had my like strategic head on, which I did not because I was in the middle of a fight and I was very tired and everything was going wrong, I probably would have gone, oh, these people are unsavable, we should all go. But I didn't.
Yeah. I think that's really one of the things that has most drawn me to LARP is the um like this psychological aspects to it that you don't get in reenactment and you don't get in HEMA. So I know, Matt, in some of your group tournaments and things like that, you get people acting in a way that you just wouldn't, and
Sure. Yeah.
basically Leroy Jenkins and into the enemy, and they get cut down, but it tactically it works out okay for their team. And like, what do you do with that? Because that's not HEMA.
Well,
No one
yeah.
would
I
do
mean,
that in a
yeah. Everything's a game at a certain point, isn't it?
yeah.
So it's just there's just different different compromises and different decision making trees in different activities. And we have this discussion over and over again about different rule sets for tournaments. And if you change the rules, maybe you change how certain things are scored, how the afterblow is scored, how doubles are scored, all of this kind of thing. You tweak some of those details, and it does change behaviours a bit.
Yeah.
And because people are trying to find the meta, they're trying to find the thing which is optimum for that rule set.
Yeah.
And so there's always going to be a degree of, if it's a game, people play the game.
Yeah, and that's why I'd like, for me, it's about doing as many of these things as possible.
Yeah.
Because experiencing all of those different things can give you a slice of what it was like, where no one thing, like reenactment won't give you the full picture, LARP won't give you the full picture, HEMA won't give you the full picture. But if you do all of it, then you might experience a small amount of the full picture.
Yes. Yeah.
And to kind of wrap up Empire, I just want to say, like, although I did not feel like my character had a particularly dramatic or heroic death, the death of my character and several other people's characters in that particular skirmish encounter produced a large amount of like game and social interaction and drama for other players, like my close friends of mine who were able to have game and drama as a consequence of that. And that makes me really happy that like there was like, because the worst thing would be for like your character to die and for it to actually like have no effect on anything. So it's a very like reassuring and heartwarming thing that there were other people that got game out of what had happened. And so despite the fact that my character died, I really enjoyed it. Me too.
So Matt, after Empire, you ran skirmish, and I was planning on coming, and then they shut the M20, not the M25, the A3.
Yeah.
So I was actually physically unable to get there without going.
No, it's just all of the roads at the moment, like roadworks everywhere you go at the moment. It took me about an hour and a half to get home from training last night, which normally would only take about 50 minutes. So.
But how did it go? Because it
went really well. Yeah.
How was it?
It was well. So it went really well. Skirmish is one of those events. It's much more relaxed and local for me, and it's just sort of slightly more chill than Fight Camp. Fight Camp's so massive because we've got 250 people, but we've got like 40 instructors. You've got like loads of classes and some, things going on at any one time. It's just a lot more hectic. More people, more staff, more logistics. Whereas Fight Camp's, for me anyway, a lot more relaxed, and I think it is for the attendees as well. So yeah, it went really, really well. Pretty similar to the last couple of years, really. We had some different classes, different instructors this year. It was probably characterized by the heat. So obviously we've been having a bit of a heat wave, and I think it was about 30. I think it was 30 degrees Celsius on the Saturday, which is when me and Gavin were teaching an armoured class, which is always interesting. I always feel like I've won a battle when I get through a really hot day in armour. I feel like that's more significant than people hitting me with things, because you are just battling your own body and constitution just to do it. And a couple of people had to flop out halfway through the armoured class because they just couldn't take the heat. But Gavin and I made it through to the end, and weirdly, I think possibly for the first time ever. So I went through that, I always find anyway, the first half hour in armour is the most unpleasant. And then you gradually get closer and closer to a sort of happy place in your armour. It's partly, I think, because things are settling into place, and but it's also partly to do with it, your bodies are acclimatizing. I think you sweat into your arming doublet, but then your arming doublet, you get to a point where it sort of cools you down as well. Anyway, so everybody else, I think, basically got to the end of the armour class if they've made it to the end and stripped their stuff off. And I thought, do you know what? I'm quite tired. I'm actually okay with the heat now. So I actually stayed in my armour for about another hour, and I was fine, absolutely fine. The only problem I have, and I've been racking my brains how to try and avoid this at Tewkesbury in a week and a bit's time, is I'm getting chafing from my male skirt. So obviously I've got a sort of belt thing that goes around my midriff at the top, and it's sort of staying in place. But the problem is I'm getting a gap between my doublet and my hose, and I'm getting really bad chafing from the male in the gap. So I'm trying to, I think the answer is to have my shirt really stuffed down, so I've got at least one layer of, not bare skin against male, basically. Anyway, the event as a whole, it went great. No injuries, thankfully. Everybody had a good time. yeah, it was really nice. And but the only thing is, we're thinking about perhaps trying to do a few things differently for skirmish next year. I want to build up the element of the sort of skirmishing melee games, mixed weapon tournament. I want to build up that element of it, perhaps to make it a bit more distinct and a bit more different to Fight Camp. But yeah, it was great, really good. We're looking forward to the next one.
I have a thought on your chafing. Do your hose point to your
they can do, but I never point them at the back because I'm worried about the restriction. So as we often see in art, they often undo, like in treatises, you often see them undo the points at the back. So I always I don't point them. So that is one answer, but I kind of feel like that would introduce other problems. So I think the problem is I wasn't wearing my shirt, my medieval shirt, under my arming doublet, which would tuck into my hose. I was wearing a t-shirt.
Yeah.
So the problem is I basically have bare skin of about that much, with mail being constantly kind of ground against my lower back.
Yeah. I'll be putting all my harness on Thursday for training, like last round before Tewkesbury, to make sure nothing's gone horribly wrong. And I had that realization, like, I'm gonna have to wash a shirt again after that, because I'm not wearing a t-shirt under that, because it will just feel wrong.
Yeah, I think the shirts are often longer than we imagine as well, so they can really tuck them in. Leonidas Sparta, it just says that they've been making some videos on his experience in Armour in Heat, because obviously Leonidas Sparta has a channel which is about ancient Greek warfare, and so his armor is very different. He has several armors now, several different hoplite armors. So yeah, they're on my watch later list at the moment, because I do enjoy those.
And I want to answer the question from Nightly Lady before we disappears off the scroll on my chat, which is, for how many years have I been doing medieval reenactment? I think about 22, something like that now, 21, 22 years. And I have always done 15th century. I've done like early 15th century and late 15th century, and late 15th century is my focus now, but that's pretty much. I did some other bits and pieces of periods like across the years, but started in 15th century. I'm still in 15th century.
I've been doing it for 20 years, and I started as a medieval reenactor, and then I realized that there's actually a difference between the different parts of the medieval period. And I started being interested in the late 14th century and really interested in the transitional armor, and then found out that most of the battle reenactments in the UK, and the jousting scene in particular, are all very much 15th century. So I had to go for that if I wanted to take part, basically, because that's what was available for me. So gradually, I kind of started wide and then gradually moved to a very specific period. Matt?
When I first started dabbling in reenactment, I was 16, and it was with, oh God, what was their? I can't remember the group's name, but anyway, it was the group that Roger Langford and the original Lancaster Armoury were involved with. Well, I can't remember the group's name, but anyway, back then, so we're going back into the mists of time, into the 90s. There was actually quite a lot of people doing 14th century. But that just seems to have, I mean, maybe because of Bohurt and things like that, I don't know, but they just seem to have disappeared. I mean, obviously you get people at Shrewsbury, but Shrewsbury seems to be full of a mixture of 13th century and 15th century reenactors sort of meeting in the middle.
Yeah.
I do think it's an interesting thing, because when I started reenactment, and like the early years that I did Tewkesbury, like the mid to late 2000s, there was an awful lot of people in essentially 14th century later 14th century, but 14th century armors on the field. And that was true of a lot of kind of later medieval events that were ostensibly 15th century. They ran that gamut from about like 1350 through to 1500. And so I wonder if like the push towards a more accurate and narrower time period at these big battle events has pushed people out of doing 14th century, because in order to go and do the big battle events, they needed different armor, different kit. Because certainly the Plantagenets who run the Tewkesbury battle, they like marshal it and script it and all of these sorts of things. They're very sort of very early 15th, if not late 14th century, with when they do their own shows. So there are groups out there, but I think they tend to do like small tournament shows rather than any kind of big battle event.
Yeah, and I think
like 100 years war reenactment isn't really a thing.
I think it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, doesn't it? You buy the kit for the events that you can go to, and then those events get bigger, and so that's what people see, and so they get that kit.
I think there was another factor going back into the late 80s when I probably, when I was in my young teens, so I wasn't old enough to get involved yet, but I was starting to go to watch events and sort of starting to get interested. And I think an element back then is there were very few armourers, and so a lot of people were actually learning to make armour themselves. And if you're going to make armour yourself, 14th century is so much easier than 15th. You know, I mean, most people with some basic metalworking skills can make a coat of plates and a great helm, you know? Yeah, exactly, yeah. So, yeah, you know, and I'm not saying that all 14th century armour is necessarily, you know, an hourglass gauntlets, for example, or a bassinet is not easy to make, but there is quite a lot of 14th century armour. The arms and the legs are simpler, coat of plates are simpler, great helms are relatively simple, you know, this kind of stuff. So, and just looking at what was available back then, you know, so to a degree, if you couldn't go and buy a sort of decent sallet or you know you know, cuirass with kind of stuff, then it seemed more accessible to get into 14th century.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Nick, you mentioned another event, Windsor.
Yeah. So it was a small event. It was mainly run by the Beauforts, who were another 15th century reenactment group. It was at Windsor Castle. Inside, I think it's the middle courtyard at Windsor Castle, the quadrangle. Lots of public interaction, no camping on site, this kind of thing. So it was quite a small event from my perspective, because I was just turning up, talking to the public, being a bod in some arena displays and sitting around. It was a lovely, relaxing event, although it was blisteringly hot. But yeah, it was a unique experience to be able to do an event inside Windsor Castle, you know, on the lawn that the state apartments look over, that kind of thing. Like, we got to kind of look around inside the castle, St George's Chapel, St George's Hall, all of that sort of thing. So yeah, so it's not a big event with lots happening, but certainly I think some of the guys who put on harness early in the morning definitely hit that stage of, we're comfortable in our armor, let's just stay in it, like, it's fine, we'll stay in it, and then the, okay, now we have to take this off, this is far too hot kind of situation.
I think it's something that people outside Europe, so maybe people involved in HEMA or reenactment in the United States or Australia or Canada or whatever, don't necessarily, maybe they do, but don't necessarily realize is one of the great sort of bonuses to being involved in living history in the UK or anywhere else in Europe, frankly, is getting access to some of these amazing places. You know, like being able to camp.
Oh yeah.
You know, like friends of mine that do stuff at Bodiam or wherever. You know, being able to camp in a place like that, stay overnight, which no one else can do really.
Yeah, I remember going to Windsor with my reenactment group, and when the guards were, you know, the guards that were behind the ropes found out what we were doing and who we were, they showed us allowed us to get close to some of the artifacts, and like being able to just look inside and see the rivets inside one of Henry VIII's armor, or something like that. Just incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Um, right. Well, that is the events done. So just before we get on to either or, which is the title of this one, I just want to thank my patrons. These people are especially kind because I have been incredibly bad at doing any videos at all recently. There has been a lot going on in real life, and I have been intending to do more, and I just haven't got around to it. So thank you everyone that supports me. Thank you everyone who supports me on YouTube as well. It's been great to see loads of comments still coming in. I still do read all of those, and um, one that comes up an awful lot. I love it when I get questions, but I do get the same question a lot. Is my most popular video is the one when I first put on my armor from Art of Steel. What do you guys think my most popular question I get on that armor is?
I know
Go on
exactly
then,
what
you
it's going
hold
to
on
be,
to it and let
and I'm wondering.
Matt make a guess.
What's the most common question?
Yeah. So I get this question. This is my most popular video. What is the most common question on my most popular video?
So I've got two guesses. One is maybe about getting up if you fall over,
Okay.
and one might be about going to the toilet.
Neither of those.
Wow.
Is it? I was 100%
No,
it was going to be how do
no.
you pee?
Obviously, I attract a higher grade of internet.
A more highbrow armor aficionado.
Yeah, absolutely. The most common question I get is, weren't Salets all German?
Oh, really? Wow. What a
So
wacky question.
Wow.
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So that's an interesting one. I think I need to make another video about that as well, because the answer is of course no. But yeah, we love questions. Thank you everyone in the chat who's been asking questions. Um, uh, Michael Foley says, "Was plate harness put on as close to the hour of battle? Or how much would they hang out in the stuff?" That depends. Um, the In the Agincourt campaign, when they knew they were being shadowed by the French army, Henry ordered that his soldiers put on their armor. So they obviously didn't wait until the last
Barnet.
moment, but it wasn't just wearing it all the time when you're on campaign.
Barnet, Edward instructs his army to sleep in their armor essentially overnight.
Yeah, because he was planning a dawn attack, wasn't he?
And on the flip side, you've got the Duke of Brabant turning up at Agincourt without his armor, so you could get both extremes.
Yeah, and it was one of the St Albans when Henry VI.
That's possibly because he was having an absent seizure.
Well, he was apparently unarmored at the time, or unable to defend himself.
Yeah, he was found unarmored sitting under a tree talking to himself.
And I guess the other thing is, as probably a lot of viewers of this would realise, is that there are degrees of. So you might be partially armored, you might have your leg harness on, but not the rest. You know.
Yeah. So when combat is reasonably likely, that's when we're expecting.
I've always thought, incidentally, it was so the male shirt worn underneath cuirass stays around for quite a long time, especially in Italy. And I've always suspected it's partially because you can wander around in it.
Yeah.
And you are reasonably armored by overall historical standards. But it's quite comfortable and not very hot. So it's a good sort of way of being a bit armored but not have the discomfort of hanging a cuirass on.
And Robert says, are there enough events in the UK to have events be year round, or are they more seasonal? It depends. I think LARP and HEMA can be a bit more year round because they're funded by the participants. So as long as you've got an area, you could even do like an indoor event in the winter months. Whereas events that require um, a large audience to pay for the displays tend to stay in the spring and summer kind of area.
I think it's a shame, actually. I think it would be nice if Tewkesbury was in May when it's supposed to be, but obviously we'd be very vulnerable to the weather then.
Yeah, well, they do a smaller event nearer to the actual date, don't they? Armour at the Abbey. So yeah. Okay. Almas is coming with a final question before I get to my questions. Did medieval baggage trains carry fodder for the cavalry horses? Yes.
Yes.
And did the horses have large logistical costs? Yes. So,
also yes.
So, long story short, horses can eat grass, but it's not the most energy-giving food. So you would tend to bring things like oats with you. Oats have a much higher energy yield for the amount that a horse eats, and so even if you're not feeding the horse oats all the time, if you're expecting battle, it's likely that you would probably give them some before then to make sure that they have enough energy to get through the battle. Yeah. Okay. Right, now I've got something for Nick and Matt to have a go at. I was very much wasting time the other day on Instagram, and I came across a trend which I think is originates on TikTok. So obviously Matt and Nick are very aware of this because they spend so much time on TikTok.
What's TikTok?
Like, you do this or this, and then the winner stays on. So it would be like, they would say Sabrina Carpenter or Lady Gaga, and then you have to answer which one's your favorite, and then whichever one wins stays on, and they bring in a new challenger, and you go through and eventually find the best whatever it is. Okay, so I've got one of these for each of the guys, and we're going to go through. Which of you wants to go first?
I'll let the guest go first.
Okay. Or should we put Nick in first and then Matt can see how it works? I don't know.
See how it works. When you first pitched this to me, I thought this was going to be like a thing that I used to do for students when I was a mathematics teacher, which is that they have to like figure out which one's the best value for money or something like that.
Okay.
Like, would you rather have this or this?
Yeah. No, this is pure objective opinion. Yeah. Okay.
This means I can get in trouble again because of the kettle hat and Morian debate.
Okay. So what I'll do then is I'll put Nick in, and you can have the helmets.
Oh no.
List. Okay. First question.
All right.
Roman cavalry helm or Sutton Hoo helm?
Cavalry helm.
Roman cavalry helm or Norman nasal?
Cavalry helm.
Roman cavalry helm or 13th century great helm?
Cavalry helm.
Roman cavalry helm or open face bassinet?
Cavalry helm.
Roman cavalry helm or hound skull bassinet?
Cavalry helm.
Roman cavalry helm or sallet?
Sallet.
Sallet or armet?
Sallet.
Sallet or great bassinet?
Sallet.
Sallet or close helm?
Sallet.
There we go. So now we know that the sallet is objectively the best.
Best helmet. Done.
Best helmet that ever existed. Okay. Do you get the idea? Okay, Matt, it's your turn now.
Okay.
You've got weapons. That's the theme
Okay.
of your list. Okay.
Yeah, I have.
Okay. Dagger or gladius?
Gladius.
Gladius or longsword?
Longsword.
Longsword or longbow?
Longbow.
Longbow or crossbow?
Longbow.
Longbow or falchion?
Longbow.
Longbow or glaive?
Longbow.
Longbow or poleaxe?
Longbow.
Longbow or spear?
Longbow.
Longbow or allspice?
Longbow.
Longbow or handgun?
Longbow.
There we go. Longbow's the winner. Longbow is the best weapon from medieval Europe, as objectively proved by Matt Easton.
This is Matt's contextless nightmare.
Yeah.
That is very, very astute.
I can see it. I can see it. You're like,
I had to basically detach myself from my own consciousness.
Yeah.
And just,
It's
so what I didn't go context free. I kept my context pants on, but I put a context into my brain, and
okay.
that context was essentially, I'm going on an adventure.
Okay.
And I don't have any armor. I'm just like me. I don't have any, like a poleaxe. Yeah, great. It only really makes sense if you've got armor. So
Yeah.
it's just me. I'm going on an adventure of these things. If I can only have one thing, well, I can't go hunting with a gladius. I mean, you can try, but I'm running around the heathland after a rabbit with a gladius. I don't think.
Yeah. Come here.
Is that why the longbow beat out the crossbow for ease of maintenance?
It was actually to do with rate of fire, and I'm just saying rate of fire to really trigger all of the archers out there watching the channel.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, because I think a crossbow is actually quite, I think it's quite a specialised thing. I think for the general everyday life, a bow is better than a crossbow. However, if you had asked me recurve bow or longbow, like composite recurve bow or longbow, I would have switched to the recurve.
I did consider putting it in, but I thought it was
because again, I'll trigger people by saying this, but they're objectively better bows.
Yeah. Yeah. So there we go. We've got two absolute facts there. The best helmet is a sallet. The best weapon is a longbow. I'll turn those into short videos so that people know for a fact that
They can clip us. Yeah.
that's the case. Yeah. Clip out all the context. We don't need the context.
No context for you.
Yeah. Right. Well, I said that we'll keep it short. We've done an hour and 22, which is pretty good. Pretty good. Thank you everyone for joining us. It's been really great to have that extra kind of interaction, having all those questions. That's been really lovely. And it's been great to hang out with you, Matt and Nick again. We should do this more often. Maybe once a month again, like we used to, Nick.
I just wish that I hadn't run out of drink about 10 minutes into the.
Oh yeah, I've done the same.
I made a whiskey and coke and drunk it in 10 minutes.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's what got you through the contextless questions. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you want to explore the Patreon. I've got a Patreon. Matt's got a Patreon. I don't think Nick's got one yet.
No.
Maybe Nick needs one. Who knows? But thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you